Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I am going to speak about Yasonization, yes, but in the context of the new extractivism and oil production and oil dependency. That is the name of this plenary. But before of that, I would like to, just for 1 minute, to mention something about energy in general. And in the past days, we have been talking about energy, but more linked with what is the movement, the heat, electricity, and in any moment, we think that energy is more than that. In the past months in Ecuador, I have been involved in a research myself, and we organized several workshops, interviews, meetings in the territories, in the indigenous communities, and never, I can swear, never, when I ask the question to the people, what is energy for you? They answer something related with heat, movement, or electricity. For the indigenous communities, for the local people, energy has to do with good health, good food from the land, has to do with time, with space, and with relations among the people and with nature. So we have to see that we have been discussing 3 days about one part of the energy, but there is a big world of energy besides this type of energy that we are talking about. So, and I am going to finish my presentation with a short conclusion regarding with this, what I start right now. So, in terms of energy, in one part of the energy, and in this case, coming from oil, I have to mention that Ecuador, where I come from, is a country that for more than 40 years have been exporting oil, and is a country that has an economy dependent of oil. Take in account that I am not saying that Ecuador is an oil country. Ecuador is a country of peasants, of artisans, of fishermen, of a different type of things, but is not an oil country. Ecuador became an oil country in our imagination. It's a social and political construction that we, as Ecuadorians, we grow up thinking that Ecuador is an oil country. But it's not true. Of course, Ecuador depends on oil for our economy. The first thing. The second thing is that in these 40 years of oil production in Ecuador, several things happen, locally, nationally, and internationally. Locally, total destruction where the oil is being extracted, as well as in other parts of the world. Ecuador is not an exception. Cultures disappear, indigenous people that disappear, an epidemic of cancer, water and soil and air pollution, etc. Nationally, during these 40 years, Ecuador is an indebtedness country, more and more. Even the president says that, Correa says that is not, but in fact there is an increase in debt, mainly with the Chinese. Ecuador is also a country that, because of oil, has an extremely dependence, and of course has what Edgardo Lander mentioned the other day, suffering these Dutch diseases, putting too much effort on develop the oil-related industry and not putting too much effort to support the local communities, the peasants, campesinos, and other type of economical sectors. Of course, Ecuador has also to do with the international and global politics of oil. Is recently member again of the OPEC countries, etc. And in this context of disaster and dependence and all the courses that means to have oil is where and why the Yasuni proposal was conceived, developed, and take care of the social movements in Ecuador. And what means the Yasuni proposal? The Yasuni proposal is very simple. It's simple, pure, you know, it's just to live underground in one block of the Amazon, one oil block in the Amazonia, 900 million of barrels of oil. This is the proposal. Not exploit these almost 1 billion barrels of oil in the ITT block in the Yasuni National Park. And this proposal was born in the heart of the social movements, environmental movements, supported by social movements and indigenous organizations. And luckily, yes, with the support of a foreigner, of an energy minister in Ecuador some years ago, in 2006 and 2007, Alberto Acosta, this proposal became a state policy of the government of Rafael Correa. But together with the proposal to leave the oil underground, the idea was to ask for an international contribution mainly to the oil, to the climate change guilty countries. That means the industrialized countries, northern industrialized countries, to contribute to this proposal. This didn't happen. We didn't receive enough support from the international community. And 1 month ago, the President Correa decided to withdraw with the proposal, the Yasuni proposal. But what we are doing now is saying that, okay, Mr. President, this is not your idea, this was not your idea, this was not even your property or your government property. The Yasuni proposal is something that the social movements and the 14 million of Ecuadorians have been fighting for during the past 6 years. So we don't want that you drop up the proposal. We want to go to a popular consultation in Ecuador to decide by ourselves if we want to leave the oil underground in ITT block in the Yasuni National Park or not. So why is so important and why we are discussing in Greece, I don't know, 10,000 kilometers from Ecuador, the Yasuni issue? Is because the Yasuni proposal is more than to leave the oil underground in this little part of Ecuador, is more than an Ecuadorian proposal. I think the Yasuni proposal is a global and symbolic issue for all over the world. Why? Because the Yasuni proposal means to end with the fuel that is feeding capitalism, because the Yasuni proposal is saying that we can't live without oil and we have to do concrete steps for that, and that means to start to leave the oil underground. And leaving the oil underground, we are finishing with most of the problems that we have in humanity. Wars, climate change, plastics invasion, transport problems. I think that this is why it's so important to discuss in this context the Yasuni proposal. And moreover of that, in a context of crisis, of accumulation, the idea to say, okay, we are going to stop to exploit oil is very crucial. And this is why it's also so important for Greece and in this moment, in this, yes, 2 minutes, in this context. think that in the case of Ecuador, and also elsewhere, one question that used to appear is to say, okay, what is the alternative? If we don't have oil, what is the alternative? And I think that the alternative is not to us to invent the alternative. Alternatives exist already. It's enough to see what is happening with indigenous communities, with peasants, with fishermen, everywhere, not only in Ecuador or in the indigenous Andes communities, probably here in Greece or in Spain, and everywhere there are already alternatives to live in a post-oil society. And when I say a post-oil means not beyond oil and we have to exploit until the last drop of oil and we start to think about what is going in the future, means a post-oil now, escaping of this slavery that we have to this hydrocarbon product. And finally, the last minute, I want to say that is something related with the debate around energy and oil. During the past days, I have been listening, and I am lucky to speak now because 2 days I learned a little bit about the Greek situation and the debate, what is going on in the leftist parties, and etc. And I think that sometimes we are like debating like in a carousel, giving rounds and rounds and turns, and we don't find the way to stop the carousel, neither the way to escape from it. And why? Because we are discussing about technology, that of course is important, but is not everything centered on technology discussion. We are talking about a sort of reforms to the system. We are talking about renewables as the way to escape of this, and this is not necessarily the solution. We are talking about, I made a list that I am not going to mention now, but we have been discussing, but never in any moment we have been discussing, okay, we are going to say no to the oil exploration in the Mediterranean. Or we are going to say, we are going to stop to exploit oil. No, we are talking about redistribution of the wealth, but not about a real change and radical change of the crisis that we are living now. And the last sentence is that we have to think about, and because Giorgos asked me to mention about something about the post-oil scenario, I think that the post-oil scenario must be not only think about the idea to leave the oil in the soil, that this is the first step, but to think that, as I mentioned at the beginning, energy is much more than oil. Energy is the energy in the territories, the energy of the mountains, the energy of the sea, the energy of the spirits. Energy is much more than this that we haven't been mentioning. And in this context, to build this post-oil, that is to think about an utopia, for us, the utopia is the Yasuní. And we say in Ecuador, la utopía está ahí, y se llama Yasuní. And this utopia is for Ecuadorians, for Greeks, for everybody in the world that really want a change towards a post-oil civilization. Thank you.